Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Shelby, and I'm a perfectionist. I'm in the perfect profession to be perfectly unsatisfied in all of the time. Not unsatisfied with my work itself. I love my job. I'm incredibly passionate about what I do. Unsatisfied with how I execute my job. You see, in my job, I will never be good enough. I am a ballerina. That's me. And this is everything that's wrong with me. You see, I work in front of a mirror about 40 hours a week. The mirrors are in the ballet studio in order to facilitate self-correcting, and so we can constantly criticize ourselves and refine and perfect every movement that we do. So I'm an imperfect person in a world that pursues perfection. I think every dancer is hyper-aware of their flaws. I know, for example, every time I lift my leg to the back in the right, it's about 3% higher than if I lift my leg to the back on the left. Or I know when I turn, I have the tendency to let my right shoulder fall forward and my elbows droop about 2 centimeters. It's all these little fine things that I have to nitpick all of the time in order to be perfect. So I'm imperfect, but it doesn't bother me, or at least not so much anymore. Oops. You see, I was very lucky in that I found my passion very early on in life. By the age of 13, I already knew I wanted to be a ballerina. I wasn't in love with the idea of being a ballerina, like many little girls are. They like the tutu and tiara. I genuinely loved dancing. I liked the feeling it gave my body. I liked the challenge to try and do something that was unnatural. And I would go away to these summer camps where I would study ballet all day, and when I came back and had to go to my normal academic classes at school during the school year, I would really miss the days dedicated to ballet. So by the time I turned 15, I convinced my parents to let me move away to a vocational ballet school. There I studied about 50 hours a week. I was surrounded by kids my age who were just as talented as I was and just as enthralled with ballet as I was. I was in this ballet bubble, and it was all that I could dream of. So that's me in that line amongst all these other ballerinas, and I was living the dream. But by the time I turned 17, something had changed. Being in such an intense atmosphere had turned my perfectionism up into high gear, and I suddenly was never satisfied with anything I did. I didn't think I was good enough, and I felt inferior to the peers around me. They changed from being a source of motivation and inspiration into being a source of self-doubt. It was so sad that I was doing something I love all day, every day, but I hated it. I had a breaking point eventually. It was in my ballet class one day. We were with our whole class, facing the mirror, and then doing an exercise like we normally do. But when I saw the reflection of my peers, all I saw was how seemingly perfect they were and how imperfect I was. And so I started to cry. But because I'm a perfect ballerina, I kept dancing. So there I was, dancing and crying and dancing and crying because I suffer from my art. And finally, my teacher told me to stop. She said, you need to go get some water, get some air, and only come back when you're ready. Of course, the director of the school then came and spoke to me when she heard that I had a little breakdown. And she said, we recommend you go see a psychologist. What? I'm not crazy. Psychologists are for people who don't know what they want. I know what I want. I want to be a ballerina, and there's a path to get there, and I'm on that path. But because she was the director of my school, I went ahead and took her advice and made an appointment. The thing is, I went in very skeptical. I'm highly skilled in a very specialized field. What would a psychologist understand about me? What would he understand about the pressure I'm under, the world I live in, and my own expectations of myself? But in our first meeting, he made a comparison to ballet that really clicked for me and initiated the first of 4 lessons I learned about being happy in the pursuit of perfection. He compared ballet to golf. He said golf, like ballet, pursues perfection. In golf, it's a hole-in-one. But golfers rarely hit a hole-in-one. Some go their entire career without ever making a single hole-in-one. So how is it possible that they can enjoy a sport where they constantly fall short of the expectations? It's because of the mentality. You see, golfers don't play golf to be perfect. Golfers play golf for the joy they get from the challenge of trying to get as close to perfection as possible, but they don't pressure themselves to be perfect. This taught me my first lesson. I have to fall in love with the process. Famed golfer Bob Rotella once said, "A golfer has to learn to enjoy the process of striving to improve. That process, not the end result, enriches life." And this is true of all professions. The highs we get from achievements, such as awards or promotions, is very fleeting. It's only there for a moment, but we spend most of our time in the process. So we need to remind ourselves, why is it that we started doing this in the first place? What do we love about it? And fall in love with the process all over again. After all, even if we do accomplish something which we thought was perfect, typically once we're there, we find a new and better idea of perfect, and then the process just starts all over again. So keeping this mentality in mind really helped me not take my dancing for granted, and I appreciated my day-to-day work much more. But, like many of you probably know, it's not always possible to mentally coach yourself out of a negative headspace. When you're really passionate about something and you fall short of your own expectations, it's totally normal to have a strong emotional reaction, depression, anger, things you can't control because it's emotional. So in those cases, I needed to find a secondary solution to help me cope with the letdowns. For me, that came in the form of humor. I learned, don't take yourself too seriously. Videos on YouTube that are like fail compilations go viral, videos seeing other people fall down, try to play tricks and they backfire. But when it comes to our own failures, we can't seem to laugh it off quite as easily. I think it's probably because we're so invested in what we do, we're too close to take distance and actually be able to laugh at it. So my solution was, I created an alter ego. I called her Biscuit Ballerina, and she embodied everything I did wrong in ballet. Basically what I would do is take anything I was disappointed in. So say I didn't lift my leg high enough. I was next to someone at bar, they lifted their leg this high, I only lifted my leg that high. Rather than being upset and feeling inadequate, I would make a joke about it later. I would tell my friend, oh yeah, you looked pretty great at bar today, but check this out. And then I would do some kind of développé with my leg ridiculously low that was nothing for a ballerina, and I would just tell her, I'll teach you how to do that later. And this helped me take a bit of distance from my work. Making a caricature out of my own flaws allowed me to laugh at them, and then I could get back to the serious work with a bit of the weight of self-criticism lifted off of my shoulders. But this kind of self-deprecating humor might not be for everyone, but we do need to find ways to get distance and to breathe when we're smothering in our own ambition. So for some people, that might be things like yoga, meditation, exercise, tuning out to music, or even just spending time with family, friends, or pets that we love. But it's this balance that's key when everything becomes overwhelming. So once again, this really helped me to be happy in my work. And once I finished banging my head against the wall and I stepped back for a moment to breathe, I realized that there were doors on either side of me. And I learned another lesson. I needed to find the opportunities that arise from imperfection. There's a famous choreographer, George Balanchine. He founded the New York City Ballet. And he was known to love working with ballerinas who were imperfect. By working with dancers who couldn't do it all, he was forced to find creative solutions and alternates that he wouldn't normally have come to. And sometimes he found things that were better than his original plan. So why don't we embrace imperfections and see where they take us instead? I think it's because there's a stigma around not sticking to original plan of action. When we tell ourselves we're going to do something, or even worse, we tell others we're going to do something, and we don't stick to that, it's seen as a failure. But just because we hit a roadblock doesn't mean we always have to plow through it. Sometimes it's totally fine to find another path and go around that roadblock, or find another path that leads off somewhere else that's even better. Last year, I was nominated for the Dance Europe Magazine Critics' Choice Award for Best Performance by a Female Artist. The interesting thing was, this nomination didn't come from classical ballet, something I'd been training my entire career for. I was actually nominated for a piece of modern dance, which is a different style. The best way I can compare it is maybe the work of a modern dancer and the work of a ballet dancer is similar to the work of a bartender and the work of a barista. Kind of they understand each other, but it's different knowledge. So when I hit roadblocks in ballet, for example, my feet, I don't have the right bone structure to go on point. I do it, but it's not the ideal. I found, okay, that's something I cannot help. It's imperfect, but it's out of my control. So I started to look at other ways to progress in my field outside of the typical way to progress. I started studying other styles, and I found strengths in modern dance that I wasn't aware of. This only supplemented my passion. It added to how much I enjoyed the challenge of classical ballet, but then also gave me something else to be proud of. This then led me to the last lesson I learned. Be authentic. You know, our idea of perfection tends to come from outside influences. What's popular, what sells, what's perfect. But we can't always attach on to someone else's idea of perfection. Many things in life, the arts, food and beverage, they're all a matter of taste. So you cannot classify what is perfect. We need to allow ourselves through trial and error to find our own perfect. The longer you pursue someone else's idea of perfect, the less likely you're going to really feel motivated to continue on that path when things get tough. After all, people aren't attracted to machines. If you're presenting something that's imperfect, but you genuinely believe in it and it's authentic to you, it won't go unappreciated. Now, these things have made a huge difference for me. I'm a happy person. I'm a happy dancer, and I hope they help you too. So I don't want you to forget to fall in love with the process. Don't take yourself too seriously. Find the opportunities that arise from imperfection and be authentic. But most importantly, be happy. Thank you.